The council chamber on the planet Erebon buzzed with quiet amusement. Species from every corner of the quadrant filled the sleek, crystal panel room. Gray-skinned Catherine, scaled Revoxians, the multi-eyed Learn. They had gathered under the seal of the United Galactic Harmony Pact. The topic of the day, Earth and its inhabitants. The speaker, High Archon Velter of the Revoxian Tribunal, flicked his long tongue before speaking. We all agree the human species is unsuited for further galactic participation. They are violent, emotional, irrational, and genetically unstable. He paused, waiting for the usual chuckles. They came. Light, dismissive laughter echoed across the hall. They can't even agree on climate management on their own planet, muttered one learned diplomat, shifting his glimmering limbs. Ban them. Let them rot on that blue rock. The vote passed unanimously. Humans were officially banned from all galactic forums, tech exchanges, and interplanetary travel systems. Their outposts were shut down. The wormholes were sealed. For a moment, the galaxy sighed with smug relief. But that same day, something strange happened. A screen, massive, ancient, long deactivated, lit up in the center of the chamber. No one touched it. No one even remembered how it worked. The room fell silent as the video began to play. It was old Earth footage, not military, not a decoration, just a clip, a human child, dirty face and thin, sitting alone on a street corner, legs drawn up, holding a half-broken toy spaceship. Rain fell heavily. The child stared at the sky, eyes wide with wonder. A line appeared at the bottom in the galactic standard language. They told us we were unworthy, but we still dream of the stars. The room went cold. No one spoke. The feed changed. Another clip. A rescue. Humans diving into rubble after an earthquake, pulling out an alien child trapped under steel. Screams in the background, flames, no protective gear, just raw desperation. One human man handed the alien child to its crying mother. Then he vanished into the fire. Another line. Even in the dark, we burn for others. Velter looked uneasy. This is manipulation, sentimental trickery. But the screen didn't stop. Now came the war archives, not Earth's wars, alien ones. Battles where humans have been deployed alongside other species. Video logs recorded by allied units. Humans covering retreats. Humans dragging injured aliens to safety. Humans defying orders just to save lives. One soldier screamed over a comlink, bloodied and broken. "Tell my wife I love her. Tell her Earth remembers." Then static. The room grew heavier with every second. A final message blazed across the screen. "You banned us. You laughed. But you forgot one thing. We never needed your approval to fight for what's right." And then the feed cut. Silence reigned. Velter stood up, his tongue nervously twitching. Who authorized this transmission? No answer. Their system showed no breach, no signal trace, no power surge. Just the truth. And it had come from nowhere. Or maybe they realized it came from everywhere humans had touched. One voice rose from back, hesitant and low. Maybe we were wrong. A diplomat scoffed. They're still dangerous. Another leaned forward. So are we. But we never gave what they gave. The screen flickered once more. A final clip. A human funeral. 100 alien faces attending. No subtitles this time. Just the sound of a human child singing an old Earth song, broken, trembling, but pure. And in that moment, the galaxy didn't laugh. Because the truth had been shown, and it burned more deeply than any weapon. The days that followed the mysterious broadcast were filled with unease across the galaxy. Media channels tried to scrub the footage, claiming it was fabricated propaganda. But it was too late. It had already gone viral. Streamed, copied, mirrored onto thousands of personal devices, even in systems where human media was illegal. On Erebon, the capital of the United Galactic Council, small crowds began to gather near the central plaza where the main holoscreen had first lit up. They stood silently, watching as fragments of the human clips replayed in loops projected illegally by unknown sources. Every time authorities took the footage down, it reappeared somewhere else, on a side building, inside a shop's inventory screen, even once flickering across the polished surface of a Revoxian patrol cruiser. Something had been unleashed, not just truth, remorse. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the lower orbital tiers, a group of humans huddled in hiding. They weren't supposed to be here. After the ban, all Earthlings were either deported or forced to go underground. These were scientists, engineers, a few soldiers, but mostly just people who had refused to abandon the galaxy they'd given everything to help build. Among them was Dr. Celia Rand, a former xenopsychologist who'd worked with multiple species during the War of Seven Suns. She sat in a makeshift lab surrounded by old data drives and dismantled surveillance drones. Her hand shook slightly as she replayed the footage that had shaken the Council. "I didn't send it," she whispered to herself for the 100th time. Someone else did. Beside her, Sergeant Mace Duran, ex-military, scarred face, eyes always watching, grunted. "It wasn't you. It was the system. You think we're the only ones still here?" Humans were seeded into every level of their tech over the last 50 years. Engineers, coders, programmers. Somebody else woke up and decided enough was enough. Celia looked at him, her voice tight. "If they find us, they'll—" Mace cut in. "And even if they do, they won't know what to do anymore." She didn't reply, not because he was wrong, but because she felt it too. That shift, the way the galaxy was starting to question itself. Back in the chambers of the Galactic Council, the topic was no longer banishment. It was containment. "Someone must answer for this breach," growled Ambassador Thrazik, a horned Skarn official. "We cannot allow humans to spin themselves into martyrs." "They already are," muttered a softer voice. "Counselor Zen from the water-dwelling Narada, and it wasn't a lie. I recognize that boy in the rubble. He saved my niece during the attack on Paradox Colony." Velter slammed his clawed hand against the table. "They are manipulating us." But no one cheered him this time. No one laughed. Instead, murmurs spread like ripples. Species who had once pushed for the human ban were now reconsidering it. Quietly, privately, carefully, because something had shaken the order, and far from the grandeur of council chambers, in a dirty back alley hab unit on the fringe of Erebon, a small alien girl cried. She'd been born after ban, raised to believe humans were monsters. Her parents said they had claws, drank oil, and ate fear. But now, in the light of the forbidden hollow screen glowing in her room, she watched a human woman laugh and cook food for alien orphans. The screen flickered, then played a song, a soft lullaby in a foreign tongue. The girl pressed her head to the screen and whispered, "She doesn't look like a monster." And she wasn't alone. Across planets, stations, and ships, billions were watching, secretly, quietly questioning. Because something deep inside them, something ancient and shared, recognized the truth when they saw it. Humans weren't perfect, but they were real, and real was dangerous. Because once the galaxy believed again in the raw, aching reality of humanity, it wouldn't be so easy to push them back into the shadows. Not this time. In the quiet hours of Erebon's second moon, the Council's elite security command gathered in secret. They called it a containment briefing, but it was clear to everyone in the room they were preparing for something bigger. Commander Inex of the Catherine Military Detail took the lead, his voice low and bitter, his four eyes scanning the nervous faces of the operatives in front of him. "We underestimated them, not militarily. Culturally." He spat the word like it was poison. "They're not trying to break our systems. They're breaking our beliefs." The intelligence officer beside him, a synthetic from the Arco 3 network, nodded slowly. "Their message is spread through 73% of the galactic comm. It's not just the original footage anymore. Now it's stories, personal logs, even alien testimonials. Humans are becoming a symbol of resilience and suffering." Inex growled. "Martyrs are dangerous. But symbols are unstoppable." The plan was set in motion. Capture the rogue humans still operating in Erevan's lower levels. Not for trial, not for questions, but for erasure. Celia couldn't sleep. Her fingers trembled over the keyboard as she tried to crack the last line of an old encryption program, one built by human engineers when Earth was still part of the Council. It was crude compared to modern code, but it had soul, and that made it unpredictable, like everything human. She paused when she heard soft footsteps behind her. Mace entered the room, eyes sharp, carrying a scrambler device. We got movement above. 6 units, not patrols. Extraction squads. They're coming for us. Celia felt her stomach drop. Then it started. He didn't respond. Instead, he slammed the scrambler onto the table. We need to move. There's a maintenance shaft behind the reactor core. Leads to the old subway tunnels. But if we run, we lose the signal hub. Mace looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw fear behind the scars. If we stay, we lose everything. A soft chime sounded from the terminal. The encryption cracked. A green light blinked. Access granted. Earth Archives. Level red. Celia stared. What is it? Mace stepped closer. She didn't answer immediately. She opened the first file. Hundreds of unsent transmissions. Stories, voices, confessions from humans all over the galaxy. Soldiers, doctors, refugees. Messages that had never made it past the Council censors. All waiting. She looked at him. They try to erase our history, but it's still here, buried in their own systems. Mace smiled grimly. Then let's give it back to the galaxy. Outside, the sounds of boots echoed through the corridor. The squads were near. Celia hit the final command. Upload all. Across Erevan and soon far beyond, terminals lit up. The skies above commercial districts filled with unauthorized holograms. School systems crashed, only to reboot with recordings of human scientists teaching alien children. Military comms blinked red as footage of humans dying beside their fellow soldiers rolled on loop. Civilian billboards played raw videos. Families separated during evacuations. Lovers parting before war. The voices of children calling for mothers who never came back. And always those same words. We were banned, but you cannot erase what we are. On ships in deep space, alien engineers wept silently. On mining colonies, workers paused to listen. On aristocratic worlds, social networks boiled with questions. The story of humanity was no longer being told about them. They were telling it themselves. Commander Inex stared at the feed in disbelief. "Shut it down," he barked. "We can't," the Arco 3 agent said, trembling. "The data is seeded in every major system. It's in their entertainment, their AI assistants, their water purifiers, for Star's sake, everywhere." Inex roared and slammed his fist into the console. "Then find the ones responsible. Make them disappear." But they were already too late. In the chaos of the transmission, Celia and Mace were gone, vanished into the underbelly of the city with nothing but a portable drive and clothes on their backs. But their message had already detonated, not with violence, but with truth. And in the hearts of billions across the stars, something began to awaken. Sympathy, memory, guilt, and the question no one dared ask out loud. Were we wrong about them? Beneath the rusted tunnels of Erevan's forgotten subway line, Celia and Mace moved in silence. The air was thick with moisture and dust, and the only light came from Mace's dim wrist lamp. Pipes groaned above them like old bones creaking under the weight of a galaxy built on silence. Celia clutched the portable drive against her chest, her breath shallow. "You think it's enough?" she finally asked, her voice small, swallowed by the hum of distant machinery. Mace didn't answer immediately. He scanned a corner before replying. Enough to wake them up. Not enough to stop what's coming. Celia didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. The Council wouldn't let this stand. They had built their empire on unity, but not the kind forged through truth. It was built through control, convenience, and a quiet deletion of uncomfortable facts. Humans had been their greatest embarrassment. a mirror that reflected everything the galaxy had tried to forget about itself. And now that mirror was cracking through every screen in existence. High above, on the orbital ring surrounding Erevan, emergency meetings consumed the chambers of a united galactic council. Velter paced in front of a semicircle of glowing faces, each representing a different species, each flickering with uncertainty. "Containment failed," he growled. "Public sentiment is shifting. There are reports of protests even among the outer rings. They're demanding a review of the human ban." Counselor Zen looked up, her translucent face weary. "Perhaps we should grant it." "No," Velter barked. "That would legitimize them, give them a platform. Maybe they deserve one." Came another voice, Counselor Straw, the insectoid delegate from the Velen hives. "I fought beside humans. I saw what they did for our colonies during the Plague Wars. They gave everything, and we turned on them the moment we felt afraid." Velter's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting we just forget their centuries of instability? Their violent tendencies? They're unpredictable." "They're not the only unpredictable species here," Zen interrupted quietly. "But they're the only ones we erased when they didn't fit." The room went silent, because deep down none of them could deny it. The ban hadn't been about protection. It had been about guilt, far from the polished halls of power. Something was happening on the ground. In the slums of Draw 6, where humans had once lived in scattered colonies before the Purge, alien graffiti artists began painting murals of human figures, arms open, standing against explosions, shielding others. On a mining outpost near the Dead Belt, alien workers walked off a job until their supervisors acknowledged the human workers who had once saved them from collapse. In a spaceport on Zarellan Prime, an old veteran stood up during a commemoration and declared, "My brother in arms was human. He died for me. I won't let you pretend he didn't exist." The word spread like a virus of truth. Back in the tunnels, Celia and Mace reached an old maintenance hub, abandoned, forgotten. The air smelled like old oil and dead wiring. Mace slammed the door shut behind them and slid down the wall, exhausted. Celia dropped to her knees, setting up a small comms device. "We need to get this drive off-world," she said. "There's a human cell still active on Verta 9. They have ships cloaking. If they can spread the archives even further." She stopped when she saw Mace wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on a corner of the room. Laser sights. Silent red dots glowing against his chest. Celia turned slowly. Figures stepped from the shadows, black armor. Council extraction units. One of them raised a hand. "Dr. Rand. Sergeant Duran, you're under arrest for violations of the council ban and for the distribution of classified human propaganda." Celia's heart pounded, but her hand never left the comms device. One press, and the full backup of the Earth archives would beam out to thousands of resistance nodes across the stars. They would never catch it all. She looked at Mace. He gave her a small nod. Then she hit the button. The screen blinked. Upload initiated. They could take their bodies, but the truth was already free. Chains. Real, cold metallic chains. That's what they used. Not the plasma binds, not the invisible energy cuffs the council favored for high-risk criminals. No, actual chains, rusted and heavy, as if they wanted to remind Celia and Mace they were beneath even standard protocol. Mace spat blood onto the floor of the prisoner transport. "They're making a show of it." Celia, her arms pinned behind her back, stared at the dim light above them. Her wrists ached. Her throat was dry. But her mind was racing. "They're scared," she whispered. "That's why they're going old school. No tech, nothing that can be hacked. They know someone's still out there." Mace turned his head toward her, one swollen eye struggling to stay open. The drive uploaded fully. For a moment, even in pain, Mace smiled. Then the door slammed open. 3 armored guards stepped inside, rifles slung across their backs, and a fourth, an officer, strode in with that same smug air the council always wore when they thought they'd won. "Dr. Celia Rand, Sergeant Mace Duran, you'll be transferred to Tribunal Ship Sanction." You will be tried in private. No press, no transmission. You will be buried in silence. Celia met his eyes, just like the others. The officer didn't flinch. This isn't about you. It's about stability. Celia leaned forward despite the chains biting into her skin. You call it stability. I call it a history written in blood and denial. The officer moved to strike her, but Mace growled low and stepped in front of her as best he could, even chained. You lay a hand on her, and I swear... The guard hesitated, then stepped back. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the look in Mace's eye. Maybe it was a realization that even captured, even bleeding, they weren't afraid. Aboard the Sanction, the trial was prepared quickly. No jury, no observers, just a panel of council judges, most of whom already had their verdict etched into their cold expressions. This tribunal, Velter announced, standing tall at the center, is not for vengeance. It is for unity. The accused have jeopardized galactic cohesion with emotional manipulation and unauthorized release of pre-banned data. Celia's voice cut through the chamber. You mean the truth? No, Velter snapped. I mean human distortion. You poison minds with Sci-Fi Stories and acts of bravery. Isolated cases twisted into a campaign of sympathy. You want chaos. I want memory, Celia said. I want the truth about who we were and what we gave. Mace stepped forward. I buried 67 aliens on my last assignment, learned Revoction's Narada. I dug graves with my own hands while you debated drone costs. We didn't poison the galaxy. We bled for it. Velter ignored him. You are relics of a species that refused to evolve. Emotional, violent, disobedient. Humanity had its chance. Then why are you afraid of us now? Celia said, eyes blazing. If we're relics, if we're irrelevant, why are you holding secret trials in a locked chamber, afraid to broadcast even our words? The silence that followed was sharp. No one moved. Even the judges shifted uncomfortably, because deep down they knew everything had changed, and trying to silence it was only making the noise louder. Outside, across the galaxy, the effects of the Earth archives upload were reaching critical mass. On a moonside colony near Arden 12, a crowd of Narada youths marched through their city square, chanting, "Let the stars remember." Their parents watched silent. A few joined them. On Kelder Station, long banners were dropped from the upper levels. Hand-painted murals of human rescue efforts. Scenes censored from official records. Civilians looked up in awe, many seeing these acts for the first time. In a Catherine broadcast channel, a former military commander broke down during an interview. A human boy, maybe 16, pulled me out of a burning wreck during the Siege of Val. I never even got his name. The council told me to forget it. He looked directly into the camera. I won't forget anymore. Back aboard the Sanction, the trial ended with no formal sentencing, because before they could finish reading the charges, every screen aboard the ship lit up with faces. Alien faces. Thousands of them, one after the other, speaking. I remember when a human saved my village. They told me humans were monsters. They lied. I want the ban lifted. I want the truth back. Celia stared at the screen, her lips trembling. She didn't know where the signal came from, how it was coordinated, but she didn't care, because finally, the galaxy wasn't just watching, it was speaking. The Sanction was never designed to withstand this kind of storm. Not physical. There were no bombs, no invasions, but still it buckled under pressure. Under truth, under the weight of voices the council thought had been silenced forever. The main command deck flickered with unstable feed lines. Technicians shouted over each other, tried to cut the signal pouring in from all sectors, but they were overwhelmed. Celia and May stood at the center of it all, chained, yet strangely free. Across every holoscreen, alien citizens spoke in raw, trembling voices. Children, elders, soldiers, scholars. None of them human, but all telling stories of the ones who were. A Veon woman cradled a faded photograph. This is my son, Savior. He had no scales, no shell, just skin and eyes that cried when my boy died. He buried him when the council said, "Leave the dead behind." A scarred miner wiped grease from his face. We were trapped. The tunnel was collapsing. The humans stayed behind to hold the supports. I still hear their screams when I sleep. A Revoxian schoolteacher, old and weary, stared into her camera. We taught our children lies. I see it now. The tribunal was frozen. Velter shouted to cut the feed. His commands were ignored. Some of the judges looked away. Others just watched. Celia turned to him, her voice quiet, almost kind. "You can't bury us anymore." "You're criminals," he spat. "Traitors." "No." Mace growled, stepping forward despite the chains. "You're just pissed the galaxy is remembering what you try to forget." Then came the moment no one expected. A comms officer, a young, learned woman, scales shimmering with stress, stood from her console. She turned slowly toward the judges. "I have a sister on Zarellan Prime," she said, voice trembling. "Last week," she watched the archive. "She didn't sleep for 2 days. She kept crying, said a human saved her during firestorms, and no one ever believed her, not even our parents." She looked right at Velter. "Now they do." No one spoke. Something broke in that silence. Something old, something rotting. And all at once, the facade cracked. Back on Erevan, the streets had changed. Small protests had become full-blown demonstrations. People carried signs in Galactic Standard and Old Terran English. Let them speak. Erase the ban, not the truth. We remember Earth. Council buildings were surrounded by peaceful marchers. Every time a screen showed propaganda, someone replaced it with a human story, a song, a face. A resistance had bloomed, but not in the shadows, in the open, and at the heart of it, the underground human network spread further. New allies joined daily. Aliens who once spat at the word human now helped smuggle supplies, spread data, build encrypted comms relays. Not out of charity, not guilt, but because they believed now, because they remembered. On the sanction, things moved fast. The council could not continue the trial, not without facing a PR catastrophe unlike anything in galactic history. They couldn't execute Celia and Mace. Too many eyes watching, too many voices rising, too many fractures forming in their grip. So they offered a compromise. Exile to be dropped on a neutral world. No communications, no transport. Better than death, they claimed. But Mace just grinned when they read the sentence. "You're not sending us away," he muttered. "You're releasing a virus." Celia smiled too. Ideas can't be exiled. As they were led toward a prisoner ship under armed guard, the escort captain, a Revoxian soldier, leaned close and whispered so only they could hear. "You're not alone anymore." The ship launched, but not into silence, because across the stars, something had changed forever. On warships and farms, in domes and spaceports, on bare moons and lush planets, people told human stories. Some whispered them, others shouted them. And for the first time in decades, the lie didn't hold, because when the council banned humanity, they thought they were burying a problem. But they forgot something crucial. You can't kill a story once it starts telling itself. And now humanity had become something more than just a species. It had become a movement, a mirror, a reminder, a revolution. The exile ship touched down hard, not on some distant, empty rock as the council had promised, but on a lush green moon orbiting a dead gas giant. Alien 4. Once a thriving trade outpost, now long abandoned after the collapse wars. Its air was breathable. The structures mostly intact, but there were no active systems, no networks, no beacons. It was a perfect prison wrapped in natural beauty, a place meant to be forgotten. Celia stumbled as the hatch slammed shut behind them. Dust rose around her boots, and the wind carried the scent of moss and silence. May stood beside her, squinting into the thick forest that bordered the landing zone. "Well," he muttered, rubbing his wrist where the chains had been. "I've seen worse." She gave a tired smile. "This isn't the end, Mace. It's the beginning they don't see coming." What the Council didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the resistance didn't end when Celia and Mace were captured. It evolved. The truth virus had spread far and wide. Humans who had been hiding on the outer colonies began stepping forward, revealing themselves. Some had spent years disguised as laborers, merchants, even as low-level tech support in Council facilities. Now, with the galaxy questioning the ban, they no longer stayed silent. They reached out to alien allies who had once turned them in, and, shockingly, many reached back. On the icy moon of Threxus, a group of young Ravoxian scholars published the first and censored anthology of human poetry translated into 12 galactic languages. They titled it "The Heart They Tried to Silence." On Zarellan Prime, 2 captain scientists refused to delete the Earth engineering logs embedded in their AI systems. They stood by them publicly, claimed they were vital to their own species' advancements. When pressured to recant, they instead released a video. "If we erase the past, we erase ourselves." The video hit over 9 billion views. On Alien 4, Celia and Mace explored what was left: abandoned buildings half swallowed by vines, a communications tower stripped of its wiring, solar panels shattered by storms. But the bones of the place were good. "We could make this livable," Celia said one night, crouched by an old fireplace, flames dancing in her eyes. "We're not alone," May said, nodding toward the edge of the tree-line. She turned. A light flickered between the trees. Then another. Shapes moved slowly, carefully. Celia stood, her breath caught in her throat. They came into the clearing. 3 figures. Not human. A Lern, a young Veon, and an older Narada woman. They stepped into the moonlight, hands raised in peace. No weapons. No threats. The Narada woman spoke first. "We heard you might be here." Celia blinked. "How?" "The archives," the Lern said, a grin on his multi-eyed face. "They led us." Mace stepped forward. "Your resistance?" The Veon girl shook her head. "Not resistance. Believers. They carried supplies, tools, maps, communications devices built from salvaged Council tech. They had come not to rescue, but to join. And they weren't the only ones. Over the next few days, more arrived, in 1s and 2s. Alien engineers, runaway smugglers, disillusioned students. Some brought messages from rebel cells. Others came simply to help build. And suddenly, Alien 4 was no longer a prison. It was a seed, a fire just beginning to burn. Back on Erebon, Velter stood in front of a cracked mirror, his ornate robe slipping off one shoulder. The footage hadn't stopped. The voices hadn't stopped. And now, internal council polls were showing something unthinkable. A full review of the human ban was being demanded by 42% of member species. "They're rebuilding," his assistant said from behind him, fear in her voice. "Alien 4. It's spreading through the undernet. They're calling it New Terra." Claws dug into his desk. Burn it. Burn the whole moon to ash. But he knew, even as he said it, they were too late, because this wasn't about humans anymore. It was about truth, about memory, about the galaxy waking up from a long, controlled sleep, and once awakened, nothing would ever be the same again. The sun rose on Alien 4 in hues of orange and violet, casting long shadows across the moss-covered ruins that had once marked the grave of a forgotten trade colony. Now it was reborn as New Terra. Smoke curled gently from chimneys built by claw and hand. Laughter echoed to the clearing where alien children played with improvised hover discs guided by an old human engineer who once designed weapons of war. The scent of cooked food, real food, grown in soil that hadn't seen life in decades, wafted through the air. Celia stood on a balcony of the old comms tower, now refurbished into a command hub. Mace joined her, his sleeves rolled up, hands dirty from a morning of hauling supplies. There were new scars on him, new lines on her face, but their eyes burned brighter than ever. We were supposed to be buried here, Celia said quietly. Mace leaned on the railing, gazing at the village below. Now look at us. We're a damn city. No, she replied, smiling. We're a message. Over the past months, New Terra had grown, not just in numbers, but in meaning. It became a pilgrimage site, a haven, a whisper on every smuggler's breath and every rebel's prayer. A symbol, and not just for humans. The council still called it an illegal colony, but across the stars, people called it hope. In a black site bunker beneath council command on Erebon, Velter stood with a trembling claw over a blinking red panel. He was watching drone footage, overhead scans of New Terra. His advisors had gathered, urging a hard decision. They built landing zones, satellite communications, a new library, said a surveillance officer, disgust dripping from his voice. And now they're forming a council of their own. Species integration is growing. Even high-born Veon youth had defected. Added another. Velter's eye twitched. They think they've won. His voice had lost the thunder it once carried. His empire, their empire, was unraveling. Not with weapons, not with fleets. With stories. With a forgotten people who refuse to stay buried. They're daring to write history themselves, he whispered, as if we don't control it. One of his aides stepped forward hesitantly. Perhaps, sir, it's time we stop controlling it. Velter stared at him like he'd spoken heresy. But deep inside, he felt what they all did. The tide had turned. Back on Alien 4, the first formal summit began. Not in a marble hall, not under banners of power, but in a converted hangar where alien and human delegates sat in a circle on old crates, worn cushions, and repurposed machinery. No thrones, no guards. Celia opened the gathering with a simple phrase. We're not here to rebuild the old galaxy. We're here to imagine a better one. Then she stepped aside. A Veon scholar stood up. For decades, I studied council law. I enforced it. I see now I help maintain a lie. I want to unlearn it and help others do the same. Next, a Revoxian farmer. My parents called humans dangerous. I watched one carry my brother 10 kilometers to get help after a cave-in. I was 6. I never forgot his face. Then Mace took the floor. He wasn't a politician, wasn't a diplomat, just a soldier who'd seen too much. His voice carried across the hangar, rough but clear. When I was stationed on Paradox Colony, we were saying, truth doesn't need weapons. I didn't believe it then. I do now. He gestured the gathered beings around him. Scales, fur, skin, chitin, all sitting as equals. This isn't just about humans. It's about who we all choose to be. The summit continued for days. Plans were drawn, ideas exchanged, wounds acknowledged. It wasn't perfect. Generations of prejudice didn't dissolve overnight. But it was real, and in that reality lay power. On the Galactic Council's Central Command ship, the Imperator, emergency signals blared through every corridor. Intelligence officers rushed between stations, their faces drawn with panic. Sir, we've lost control of the Northern Quadrant's communication grid. A Catherine lieutenant reported, scales slick with nervous sweat. Every screen is broadcasting footage from New Terra. Velter's claws dug into his command chair. Override it. We've tried. The code is, it's unlike anything we've seen. It's rewriting itself faster than we can block it. What the council couldn't understand, was that they weren't fighting against a rebellion anymore. They were fighting against memory itself. Across New Terra, a team of renegade programmers, human, learn, even young Revoxians, had created something unprecedented, a distributed consciousness algorithm based on collective trauma. They called it Mnemosyne, after the Greek goddess of memory, and it was alive. Celia stood in the code chamber deep beneath New Terra's main settlement. Around her, walls of salvage screens pulsed with millions of data points, each one a memory, a testimony, a story uploaded from beings across the galaxy. It's working, she whispered, watching as Mnemosyne infiltrated system after system, not as a virus, but as a witness. Every lie the council had told was being exposed, not through propaganda, but through lived experience. The algorithm didn't need to fabricate. It simply remembered. On luxury worlds where elites had shielded themselves from truth, screens flickered to life showing the cost of their comfort. On military academies where recruits were taught humans were monsters, cadets watched footage of their own ancestors fighting alongside Earth soldiers. The galaxy was remembering, and it was choosing sides. Velter knew he was losing. He could feel it in the way his own staff avoided his gaze, in the hesitation before they followed orders. The old fear was gone, replaced by something worse. Doubt. "Prepare the cleansing fleet," he commanded. Voice hollow in the silent chamber. "Target New Terra. We end this today." His second-in-command, a learn who had served him faithfully for decades, didn't move. "Sir," she said quietly, "that would be genocide." "It's pest control," he snarled. "They've infected the galaxy with sentiment and weakness. We restore order. By massacring a peaceful settlement?" Another voice, the Narada delegate who had once supported the ban. "There are children there. Our children." Velter rose from his chair, towering over them. "When did you become sympathizers?" "When we remembered who we were," the learn replied, and there was no fear in her eyes anymore. That was when Velter realized the truth. He'd already lost, not just the battle, but the narrative itself. He'd spent decades crafting a galaxy where humans were villains, where sentiment was weakness, where truth could be rewritten by those in power. And now, the screens, those same screens he'd used to spread his version of history, had turned against him. They remembered. He reached for his emergency beacon, the one that would summon his personal guard, but found only empty air. The Narada delegate held it in her webbed hand. "There won't be any guards," she said softly. "They're all watching the screens, too." The climax came not with weapons, not with fleets, but with a transmission that cut through every channel in the galaxy. It originated from New Terra, but spread like wildfire through Demosthenes' network. On screen after screen, world after world, the image appeared. A simple gathering in the heart of New Terra. Human and alien, standing together beneath an open sky. Celia stepped forward, her voice steady but warm. "To the United Galactic Council and all beings who hear this message, we are not asking for war. We are not seeking vengeance. We are offering remembrance." The camera panned out to show thousands gathered in the central square. Humans who had survived the ban, aliens who had defected, children born in a world where the lines between species had already begun to blur. For too long, we've been told that unity means silence, that peace means forgetting, that safety means erasing those who remind us of our own frailty. She gestured at the crowd, where a small human girl stood hand in hand with young Ravoxian, their fingers intertwined despite the differences in their flesh. But true strength isn't built on forgetting. It's built on remembering. All of it, the heroism and the failure, the sacrifice and the mistake, the glory and shame. Mace joined her, scarred face solemn in the golden light. "We invite the council to New Terra. No weapons, no armies, just witnesses. Come see what we've built here." The camera pulled back further, revealing the true scale of what had once been an exile colony. Now it was a thriving city, gardens stretching between ancient ruins, new structures built with care and vision, faces of every galactic species moving in harmony. "The ban ends today," Celia said, "not because we demand it, but because it has already failed. Memory is stronger than fear. Truth outlasts power." She stepped aside, and one by one, beings from across the galaxy stepped forward to speak. Names, dates, places where humanity had touched their lives. Not propaganda, not manipulation. Just truth, finally unleashed. And in orbit above New Terra, the Council's cleansing fleet appeared, massive warships designed to turn the moon to ash. The colonists saw them through their scopes, felt the shadow of death hovering. But they didn't flee. They didn't hide. They continued broadcasting. Aboard the lead destroyer, Admiral Vex of the Catherine, elite guard watched the transmission with the rest of his crew. His orders were clear: obliterate New Terra and everyone on it. Make an example. Restore order. But as the camera zoomed in on a small gathering at the edge of the crowd, he froze. There on the screen, his daughter, the one who had disappeared 3 months ago, leaving only a note. I'm going to find the truth. She stood tall among the others, her Catherine scales gleaming in the sun, and she was smiling. Vex's claw hovered over the launch sequence. Sir, his weapons officer prompted. We have target lock. The Admiral stared at the screen, at his daughter, at the beings gathered around her, beings he'd been taught to despise or pity or fear. Stand down, he whispered. Sir. He turned to face his crew, all watching him, all seeing the struggle on his face. I said stand down. All ships, full retreat. But the Council's orders were wrong. He straightened his back, finding strength he didn't know he had. I won't be remembered as the one who murdered my own child to protect a lie. Across the fleet, the same scene played out as commanders watched the broadcast. Some had friends on New Terra. Some had family. Some just couldn't deny the truth any longer. One by one, the warships powered down their weapons. And on New Terra, as the colony held its breath waiting for death, they watched in awe as the deadly fleet slowly, deliberately turned away. In that moment, the real victory was won, not through force, not through fear, but through the simplest, most human weapon of all, memory. The aftermath unfolded more quickly than anyone expected. Velter was removed from power, not by coup or assassination, but by a formal vote of no confidence. The ban on humanity was officially lifted in a quiet ceremony that was anything but quiet in its impact. Delegations from across the galaxy traveled to New Terra, not as conquerors or saviors, but as pilgrims. They came to see, to learn, to remember. Some stayed. Others returned home carrying seeds of change. Celia and May stood at the edge of the settlement one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded them both of Earth. Think we'll ever go back? Mace asked, his voice soft with something like hope. Celia smiled, gazing at the thriving community they'd built from exile and desperation. Alien children chased each other through gardens tended by human hands. Engineers from 6 species collaborated on new habitats. Somewhere, music played, a blend of human melodies and Revoxian harmonics. I think, she said, we already have. The next day, as dawn broke over New Terra, every screen across the galaxy lit up one final time. Not with propaganda, not with rebellion, but with an invitation. Remember with us. And across the stars, beings of every form and history did just that. They remembered not just the past, but the future they could build together. A future where truth wasn't feared, where difference wasn't erased, where memory wasn't a weapon but a bridge. The screens that had once shown lies now showed something much more powerful, possibility. And that, perhaps, was the greatest revolution of all.